What if one spell in Prisoner of Azkaban proves Voldemort should never have come back at all? Not a fan theory, not a headcanon fix, but an actual piece of canon magic that, if we take it seriously, tears open the entire logic of the war. Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of our ongoing Harry Potter plot hole series. If you've been with us from Philosopher's Stone through Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, and Half-Blood Prince, you know we've been slowly pulling at loose threads in the story. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to queue them up after this, because today is the big one. This is where all those little wait, hang on moments start talking to each other. I want to be clear about what I mean by plot hole here. We're not just saying, why didn't they use an owl? Or why didn't anyone try Accio Horcrux? A character making a bad decision is not automatically a plot hole. What we're looking at today are structural problems in the books, places where the established rules of magic and the internal explanation of the world actually undercut the stakes, the war, and even who logically should have won. Take time turners. In Prisoner of Azkaban, we watch Hermione and Harry casually rewrite a night's worth of events. They save Buckbeak. They save Sirius. They prove that time travel exists, works, and can change outcomes. If that magic is on the table, how does the Order of the Phoenix ever justify not trying it again when Voldemort returns? Why is James still dead? Why is Cedric still dead? Why is Dumbledore calmly accepting the timeline instead of shattering it? And that's just the beginning. Because once we start stacking these pieces, the story gets very wobbly, very fast. The Elder Wand is supposed to be the unbeatable wand, bound by a very specific wand law logic. Yet if we follow that logic strictly, the final duel in Deathly Hallows starts to look like a moment where Harry actually should have lost. I'd also argue that the book quietly changes its own rules about what counts as defeat just to make the ending work. Then there's House Elf magic. Dobby and Creature can bypass protections that stump the greatest wizards of the age, apparating in and out of places that are supposedly unplottable and secure. If that's true, why isn't the war basically an elf-based teleportation campaign? Add Polyjuice Potion, which makes the Ministry's identity checks seem almost laughably flimsy, and Horcrux soul math that doesn't quite add up. And we're suddenly in a version of the wizarding world where the most important battles should have played out completely differently. We love these books, which is exactly why it's fun to poke at the foundations a little and ask, okay, but what if the rules really applied? So, in this video, we're going to imagine those alternate timelines. The Time Turner War, the Elder Wand backfiring on Harry, the House Elf Uprising, the Polyjuice coup, and a Horcrux plan that doesn't actually end with Voldemort. Let's dive into it. Before we dive into those alternate timelines, we should zoom out for a second and remember how we got here. This video isn't just a one-off rant about Deathly Hallows, it's the latest stop on a long, slightly obsessive road trip through the series' internal logic. Hey everyone, welcome to another installment in what has basically become our grand project, building the ultimate Harry Potter plot hole map, book by book. We started all the way back with Philosopher's Stone, asking why on earth the most powerful magical artifact of the age was guarded by. A logic puzzle and a chess game that 3 first years could beat. If Dumbledore actually wanted to protect the stone, why design a security system where be good at homework is a viable heist strategy? From there, we moved into Chamber of Secrets and got lost in the basilisk logistics. How does a giant snake live in the plumbing for decades without anyone noticing the feeding schedule, the smell, or, the massive tunnels? We talked about Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the school's layout, and whether the castle's magic would really let a murder serpent commute through the pipes every term. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the Time Turner episode was basically our first big reality break. We laid out how the same spell that lets Hermione attend extra classes should theoretically let the Order go back a few hours to save James and Lily, stop Peter escaping, or even prevent Voldemort's return. I want to be clear about what I mean by that, not that every character is stupid for not doing it, but that the book introduces a piece of magic so powerful it quietly breaks the stakes of almost every later story unless we invent extra rules. Goblet of Fire was where things really escalated. We went line by line through the Triwizard Tournament contract and asked why Voldemort needed a year-long, extremely public game show just to portkey Harry to a graveyard. We compared that to all the other portkey moments in the series, and I'd also argue that episode is where a lot of you in the comments started offering some of the best headcanon fixes we've seen. Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, Deathly Hallows. We've been tracing this same pattern, amazing story, but magic rules that wobble the harder you lean on them. The last few videos alone have pulled in hundreds of thousands of views and thousands of comments. Many of them you guys debating whether house elf magic makes wizards obsolete, or whether Polyjuice should have turned the Ministry into an identity crisis every Monday. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to cue those earlier episodes after this one, because each part adds another layer to how the wizarding world's rules do, or really don't, hold together. And this time, we're not just adding new dots to the map, we're going to start connecting them, showing how the Time Turners, the Elder Wand, Polyjuice Security, House Elf Magic, and Horcrux Soul Math don't just create isolated plot holes, but point to much bigger contradictions in the foundation of the franchise. I'll let you guys be the judge of what that actually means for the final battle, so let's dive into it. So when we say these aren't just isolated mistakes, we really mean it. Some plot holes live and die in a single scene. They make you pause, maybe roll your eyes, and then the story moves on. But other inconsistencies sit under the entire series like a loose floorboard. Step on them, and the whole structure of the war, the Ministry, even the nature of magic itself starts to wobble. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. A local plot hole is something like a character forgetting a spell they used 2 chapters ago, or a door that's locked in one moment and randomly open in the next. Annoying, sure, but it doesn't rewrite who wins the Battle of Hogwarts. Global contradictions are different. They're the ones where, if we follow the book's own rules a little more consistently, we don't just fix a scene. We change who lives, who dies, and whether Voldemort ever comes back at all. And the 5 areas we're focusing on in this video are all global. Time Turners, the Elder Wand, Polyjuice and Security, House Elf Magic, and Horcrux Logic aren't background details. They're the rulebook for the war. If Time Turners work the way they do in Prisoner of Azkaban, the Order of the Phoenix has a theoretical undo button on half the worst events in the series. If Elder Wand allegiance works the way it's described in Deathly Hallows, then Harry arguably shouldn't win that final duel. That's not nitpicking. That's the ending of the saga. Hey everyone, welcome to another moment where Harry Potter's own love of rules kind of turns against it. This is a very rule-heavy fantasy world. Spells have incantations and wand movements. Potions have brewing times and ingredients. The Ministry has departments, regulations, courtrooms. Hogwarts has timetables and exam structures. That rich detail is a huge part of why the books feel so immersive, but it also invites us to test the logic. Once you tell us exactly how Polyjuice works, we're going to notice when the Ministry forgets it exists. And because these books are so beloved, we keep rereading them. We know the lines. We remember Hermione explaining Gamp's law, or Dumbledore lecturing about wand law, or Creature popping into places that are supposedly unplottable. So when a later book quietly ignores those earlier explanations, especially in a way that's seemingly convenient for the plot, it stands out. I'd also argue that's why fandom debates around these topics get so intense. We care enough to track the rules across 7 books. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to think back to your own rereads as we go, because these 5 contradictions don't just create paradoxes on paper, they reshape what strategies any rational witch or wizard would use. And nowhere is that more obvious than with our first topic. Time turners don't just let Hermione take extra classes. Used even half rationally, they might erase the entire Second Wizarding War before it starts. So let's dive into it. Time turners breaking the war before it starts sounds wild. But it also raises a bigger question for this whole video. How is magic actually supposed to work? Because before we dive into each specific plot hole, we need a framework. Otherwise, every strange moment just turns into, well, it's magic, don't worry about it. I want to be clear about what I mean by magic here. In Harry Potter, there are really 2 layers. First, we have what I'd call deliberately mysterious magic. This is the veil in the Department of Mysteries where Sirius falls. It's the way death itself is treated, or the full extent of Dumbledore's knowledge. We're meant to feel that the universe is bigger and stranger than any one explanation. The book almost leans in and says, you're not supposed to understand this, you're supposed to feel it. Then there's the other layer, which is rule-based and teachable. Charms class. Potions with step-by-step instructions. Portkeys that activate at a set time. The Marauder's map that shows every person at Hogwarts, apparently with no cooldown or range limit. Here, the story invites us to track the rules. Hermione literally lectures us on Gamp's law. Lupin explains how the Patronus works. We're encouraged to think, okay, under these conditions, this spell should do X. That's where logic comes in. The tension starts when those 2 layers blur in a way that feels less like mystery and more like a cheat code. There's even a name for it, Deus Ex Machina. That's when a new magical object or ability shows up at the exact right moment to solve a problem, without being properly set up or limited by what we've been told so far. Think of the Resurrection Stone suddenly giving Harry a perfect emotional send-off, or a wand changing allegiance in a way we've never seen before. Is that deep lore, or is the story quietly moving the goalposts? I'd also argue that not every seemingly convenient event is a true plot hole. Sometimes the books skate right up to the edge, but stay technically consistent. Polyjuice Potion, for example, can explain a lot of infiltration nonsense at the Ministry if we assume they're just careless. House elves apparating into Hogwarts doesn't break the world if we accept that elf magic is fundamentally different from wizard magic, even if it makes Dumbledore's security measures look a bit embarrassing. But other moments don't just feel convenient, they contradict what we've already been told. If time-turners exist the way they do in Prisoner of Azkaban, why are they never even discussed when Voldemort returns? If wand allegiance works the way it suddenly does with the Elder Wand, why hasn't that rule mattered in any previous duel? At that point, we're not in eerie, unknowable territory. We're in, wait, hang on, that's not how you said this works territory. And a lot of the examples we're about to cover lie right on that border. Are they clever uses of underexplained magic? Or are they narrative shortcuts wearing wizard robes? I'll let you guys be the judge as we go. Because once we accept this framework, the next topic gets even messier. When time travel isn't the only thing that could have ended the war in a day. So if time travel isn't the only thing that could have ended the war in a day, we need to pause and ask a basic question. What actually counts as a plot hole in Harry Potter? And what's just a weird wizard choice? Before we dive into time turners, house elves, and wand allegiance, we need some ground rules. I want to be clear about what I mean by plot hole. A character making a risky or emotional decision is not automatically a plot hole. Harry running into the Department of Mysteries to save Sirius even though it's obviously a trap? That's reckless. But it fits a 16-year-old who's traumatized and furious. Ron abandoning the Horcrux hunt in a moment of jealousy and fear isn't a failure of logic, it's character drama. People in real life make bad calls with limited information all the time, and characters are allowed to do the same. On the flip side, there are things that look off that we're not going to count. Continuity mistakes, like Lily's eyes being brown in one movie and green in another, or a chair in the burrow mysteriously jumping between shots, are production errors. They might pull us out of the movie for a second, but they don't change what the book or film is telling us about how magic works or how events unfold. That's not the kind of problem we're interested in here. What we're actually chasing are moments where the story contradicts its own established rules in a way that matters to the outcome. Not just background flavor, but cause and effect. If a time turner is shown in Prisoner of Azkaban to let you go back hours and physically intervene, and then later everyone acts like there is no way, ever. That time magic could have been used to stop Voldemort's rise. That's at least a tension in the internal logic. If Polyjuice Potion can perfectly mimic someone for an hour with a single hair, but the Ministry somehow never uses it for high security verification, that starts to feel like more than a convenient oversight. The key phrase here is internally established rules. When the books stop and carefully explain how something works, that's a contract with the audience. Time turners have limits. Polyjuice has a brewing time and specific effects. Horcruxes require murder and split the soul into fragments. The Elder Wand changes allegiance through defeat. Once those rules are on the table, ignoring them later is fair game for critique. I'd also argue that this is exactly why Deathly Hallows comes under so much scrutiny. By this point, the rulebook is thick. So, in this video, we're going to follow a consistent pattern. Each time, we'll briefly recap the relevant scenes, then cite the rule as it's given in canon, and only then point out where the contradiction appears and why it's important. Does it lower the stakes? Does it make a character's sacrifice meaningless? Does it suggest there was an easier solution sitting in Dumbledore's desk the whole time? Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive into that kind of question. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to look at our earlier entries on the other books, because we'll be building on ideas from those. And with our definition locked in, let's dive into it and start with the most infamous device of all, time turners, and why the Order never turned back the clock on Voldemort. Now, before we dive in and start throwing time turners and elder wands around like courtroom exhibits, I want to be clear about what I mean by plot hole in this video. Not every example we're about to cover is a slam dunk, mathematically airtight contradiction. A lot of them live in that fuzzier space of, hang on, how is this supposed to work exactly? Rather than aha, the whole book collapses on page 412. That's important, because Harry Potter is a series that invites this kind of obsessive rereading. The magic is detailed enough that we can talk about Gamp's law, wand allegiance, Horcrux logic, all of that. But it's still a fantasy story, not a legal document. Sometimes the problem isn't that something is literally impossible, it's that it seems impossible to square with what we've already been told, unless we start adding our own assumptions on top. And to be fair, the fandom has been doing exactly that for years. For every why didn't the Order use time turners to stop Voldemort, there are 3 clever headcanons about ministry crackdowns, paradox rules, or Dumbledore quietly deciding that breaking time is worse than losing the war. For every question about Polyjuice security, there's an explanation about detection spells or how unreliable the potion might actually be in practice. Some of those theories are genuinely satisfying. I'd also argue that a few are better than anything we get on the page. But here's the key. Those fixes are not in the text, they're optional DLC. So what we're going to do is treat each topic like a little trial. When we get to the 7 Potters plan, does flying a bunch of Harry clones through an obvious ambush feel like a genuine plot hole? A forgivable oversight because the scene is exciting? Or something that can be rescued with a reasonable in-universe explanation? When we talk about Dobby and house elf magic ignoring half the protections in the story, is that a devastating blow to wizard logic, or just a sign that wizards are arrogant and bad at risk assessment? I'll let you guys be the judge on each one. As we go, try to decide. Is this a place where the book quietly breaks its own rules, or are we just missing a line or 2 of dialogue that would have cleared everything up? And if you think we're being too harsh on a particular moment, say so. The comments are where a lot of the best counter-arguments and extra explanations show up. What we're not doing is turning this into a fight over who's right about the books. Disagreement is part of the fun of deep dive fandom. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to look at our earlier videos and see how your verdicts compare, because people absolutely do not agree on which plot hole is the worst. And speaking of disagreement, there's one topic coming up that might be the most contentious of all: Horcrux math. Depending on how you interpret the soul fragments, Harry's sacrifice in the forest either neatly solves everything or barely scratches the problem and raises even more questions. When we get there, we're going to lay out multiple plausible readings that completely change what his death actually did. But before we start splitting souls, we need to talk about why the Order never split time itself and erased Voldemort from the timeline. And that brings us to something a little different for a moment. Before we dive in and start rewriting the entire timeline with time turners, we should probably talk about why this whole series exists in the first place, and why sticking to the rules of the magic actually matters here. Hey everyone, welcome to another long, probably way too detailed breakdown where we take the Harry Potter books at their word and then see what happens when the logic doesn't quite hold. If you're the kind of person who remembers Gamp's Law, who knows exactly how far a time turner can jump, and who still argues about wand allegiance at 3 in the morning, this channel is built specifically for you. We're not just listing every plot hole we can think of, we're asking what each seemingly small inconsistency does to the story when we take the canon seriously. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. A lot of people enjoy Harry Potter as cozy fantasy, and that's great. But we like to ask if house elf magic can ignore Hogwarts protections. What does that actually mean for the war? If Polyjuice Potion lets you mimic someone with a single hair, how does the Ministry function at all? When we pull on those threads, the entire book starts to reshape itself, and that's the kind of deep dive we do in almost every video. Those videos take a surprising amount of time, researching obscure quotes from Half-Blood Prince, cross-checking interviews, scripting nearly 2-hour breakdowns where we track every spell, every rule, every explanation. It adds up. So if you're enjoying this and you want more long-form book-accurate analysis, hitting the like button is actually really important. It's the simplest way to tell the algorithm, and honestly us, that spending weeks on one plot hole series is worth it. I'd also argue that if you've made it this far into a video about Deathly Hallows logic, you're exactly the kind of viewer we're making this for. So if you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to look at the rest of the playlist after this. We've already gone through Philosopher's Stone all the way to Half-Blood Prince, and each entry has its own rabbit hole. Time Turners in Prisoner of Azkaban, Triwizard Security in Goblet of Fire, the Ministry's very questionable choices in Order of the Phoenix. You can absolutely lose a weekend rethinking the entire wizarding world. And if you want to catch what's coming next, the Fantastic Beasts inconsistencies, the Cursed Child time travel chaos, character-focused logic breakdowns like how Dobby quietly proves wizards are obsolete, then subscribing and turning on notifications is the best way to do that. I'll let you guys be the judge of which story breaks the rules the hardest. Alright, with that out of the way, let's talk about the spell that should have ended Voldemort before he even came back. The Time Turners, and why the Order never used them to break the timeline. Massive plot hole number 1. Time Turners make Voldemort's return optional. This is where the story quietly hands us a piece of magic so powerful it should break the entire war. And then, just as quickly, it tucks it back into a drawer and pretends it never happened. So, hey everyone, welcome to another one of those moments where the books give us a rule, use it once, and then hope we forget the logic that comes with it. Before we dive in, I want to be clear about what I mean by time turners here. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione is given a Ministry-approved device that lets her go back in time hour by hour to attend more classes. We see her and Harry use it to relive the same evening, rescue Buckbeak from execution, and pull Sirius out of the tower before the Dementors can perform the kiss. It's not a vague prophecy or a weird dream. It's literal, repeatable time travel demonstrated on the page. The book even shows us some of the rules. You can only go back a limited number of hours. You can't be seen by your past self. And whatever happened, Harry was always the one who cast the Patronus across the lake. Within that small window, though, the magic is unbelievably effective. They reverse 2 government-sanctioned deaths in a single night and walk away with no timeline collapse, no time police, no giant cosmic penalty. And just like in the rest of this video, our pattern is going to stay the same. First, a quick story recap of how the magic is introduced. Then, we'll cite the in-universe rules the book actually gives us. After that, we'll line those rules up against later events and look at the contradiction. Finally, we'll ask the really uncomfortable question: if we took this spell seriously, what would it change about the war with Voldemort? Because this isn't just a "why didn't they save Cedric" complaint, even though that's already a big emotional moment. I'd also argue that once the Order of the Phoenix knows Voldemort is back in Goblet of Fire, the existence of Time Turners raises a much bigger problem. Why doesn't anyone at any point try to use this technology to preempt his rise? Not to rewrite his entire childhood, but to nudge a few key hours, warn the right person, move a prophecy, guard a specific object. The usual explanation is that all the Time Turners were destroyed in the Department of Mysteries. But that happens after Voldemort returns, after Cedric dies, and after the Ministry has already been covering things up for a full year. Even if that destruction is total, it doesn't answer what Dumbledore and the Order were doing with them before that point. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to remember how tightly this series normally treats magical limits. Because in the next section, we're going to push those Time Turner rules as far as they can go. Specifically, we'll walk through a single canon-consistent loop that Dumbledore could have set up using just one device, one night, and one message, and how that might have rewritten the entire war before it ever reached Deathly Hallows. So, to build that hypothetical loop, we first have to rewind to the one time the books actually show us a Time Turner working in detail. Let's dive into it by going back to Prisoner of Azkaban, because buried in that 3rd book is the clearest, most precise rule set for time travel that the series ever gives us. Hermione doesn't get her Time Turner from some ancient vault or prophecy. McGonagall just signs a form. The Ministry approves it. And suddenly a 3rd year has a device that lets her attend multiple classes at once. That alone tells us something important. Time Turners are rare, sure, but they're not mythical artifacts. The Ministry has enough confidence and enough supply to park one at a school and trust a stressed-out 13-year-old with it. I want to be clear about what I mean by rule set here. When Dumbledore sends Harry and Hermione back, he gives very specific instructions. 3 turns should do it. Don't let anyone see you, and don't meddle with time. He treats those warnings as deadly serious. At the same time, the story immediately shows those rules being bent in the most extreme way possible. They don't just sneak to an extra arithmancy lesson, they alter life or death events. We watch them go back exactly 3 hours. That precision matters. Hermione can dial in a specific number of hours, arrive at a known point in her own past, and interact with a timeline she already lived. We see Rock throwing at the hospital wing window. We see Harry casting the Patronus that he originally thought was his father's. This isn't a multiverse, it's a closed loop, and the magic is repeatable. And yet, within that loop, outcomes change. Buckbeak, who was seemingly executed, is freed. Sirius, who was doomed to a Dementor's kiss, escapes on Buckbeak's back. From the perspective of everyone else, history has been overwritten. The axe still falls, but on empty air. The official record says Buckbeak died, But we and Dumbledore know that isn't actually what happened. Dumbledore's warnings are about recklessness, not about some cosmic law that says you can't use this magic for big things. He never says, you must only use this for homework, or the device breaks if you save a life. In fact, he quietly encourages them to save 2 lives in one night. I'd also argue that if there were a hard limit against using time-turners in crises, this is exactly the moment he would have said so. So canon gives us a device that can target hours, interact with your own past, and generate new outcomes, all while the universe stays stable. No paradox, no timeline collapse, just a stern "don't be stupid." If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to remember those rules, because in the next section we're going to ask the obvious question. If this is how time-turners actually work, why didn't the Order break them out when Voldemort returned? So let's dive into it, because once we hit the end of Goblet of Fire, the time-turner question stops being a fun thought experiment and starts looking like a genuine plot hole. At that moment in the story, everything changes. Voldemort is back, the graveyard scene is real, and Dumbledore believes Harry instantly. The Order reforms. The adults finally admit we're at war again. And here's what's important. These are the same adults who already know, from personal experience, that time travel works. McGonagall signs off on Hermione using a time-turner for an entire school year. Dumbledore personally engineers the Buckbeak and Sirius rescue. Nobody explodes. Reality doesn't fracture. The book goes out of its way to show us that if you follow some basic rules, you can interact with your own past and actually save lives. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the magic isn't presented as a wild experimental spell. It's regulated but reliable. The Ministry has enough time-turners to lend 1 to a 3rd year for extra classes. Dumbledore is confident enough in the logic of the loop that he tells Harry and Hermione exactly when and how to intervene. This isn't a one-off miracle, it's a known, tested piece of magic. Now jump ahead to the post, Goblet of Fire world. Dumbledore and the Order know Voldemort is back. They know people are going to die. They even have a rough idea which people. James and Lily, Cedric, the prophecy, eventually Dumbledore himself. So the obvious question is, if we can use a time-turner to save Buckbeak and Sirius, why can't we use it to save literally anyone else? Why not warn James and Lily before Godric's Hollow? Why not snatch Cedric away from the maze a minute early? Why not preemptively destroy Horcruxes before Voldemort returns at all? And remember, this isn't a group that's shy about risk. These are the people who start Dumbledore's army under Umbridge's nose, who infiltrate the Ministry to grab the prophecy, who fly 7 Harry Potters through an obvious death trap in Deathly Hallows. They will absolutely gamble with their own lives and with the entire war effort when they think the payoff is worth it. So, the idea that they're suddenly too cautious to touch time travel doesn't really hold up. Even one carefully planned loop could change everything. Go back a few hours before the Department of Mysteries and move Sirius out of Grimmauld Place. Go back before the Astronomy Tower and evacuate Dumbledore. Go back before the Battle of the 7 Potters and reroute the entire plan. Or grab the prophecy before Voldemort ever hears about it. We don't need infinite rewinds, we need one targeted intervention. I'd also argue that this is where the story's own rules start to clash. Azkaban shows us stable, safe loops that can save lives. The later books show us a war where nobody even attempts that option. I'll let you guys be the judge, but given what we see in Azkaban, the decision to never use strategic time travel once Voldemort returns feels less like caution and more like a convenient omission. In the next section, we have to ask whether the all the time turners got smashed explanation actually fixes that, or just makes it worse. So let's take that all the time turners got smashed line and actually follow the logic through, because this is where the plot hole stops being a quirky detail and starts rewriting the entire war. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. We're not just saying, oh, time travel exists, so everything is broken. We're saying, if the Ministry has time turners, and if Dumbledore is willing to bend rules to save lives, then once Voldemort returns, there is no in-universe reason not to at least attempt a controlled time intervention. We've already seen in Prisoner of Azkaban that Dumbledore will quietly hand a time turner to a third year so she can take more classes and eventually rescue Sirius and Buckbeak. That's a huge ethical and magical decision. So when Voldemort comes back, the stakes are now infinitely higher. Why does that same Dumbledore never say, Hermione, we're going to do one more loop, but this time it's to stop a war? The story just never asks. Let's dive into it. Imagine a simple, contained example. The night on the astronomy tower, Dumbledore knows he's weakened and surrounded. In a time turner world, the Order could go back 3 hours, disillusion themselves around the tower, and prevent Draco from ever disarming him. No disarm, no transfer of wand allegiance, no chain reaction that eventually arms Voldemort with the Elder Wand, one tiny loop, massive payoff. Or take the Department of Mysteries. The book presents Sirius's death as this tragic, irreversible moment. But if time turners are on the table, the Order has options. They could go back and move the prophecy in advance, or simply intercept Harry before he ever leaves Grimmauld Place. Even a 1-hour rewind lets them apparate him somewhere else, or send a Patronus with the real explanation. The entire battle becomes a preventable scheduling error. Now, people often respond, well, all the time turners were destroyed in that very battle. Sure, that's the line we get later, and it's clearly there as an explanation. But this is a retroactive patch. It doesn't explain why nobody used them in the first war against Voldemort when James and Lily were under threat. It doesn't explain why, in the early Second War before the Department of Mysteries, Dumbledore never quietly borrows one for something a little more important than double arithmancy. I'd also argue that if we fully embrace time turner logic, the main narrative of Harry Potter actually collapses. Voldemort's rise stops feeling inevitable and starts feeling like a choice. Key deaths like Cedric, Sirius, even Dumbledore himself become avoidable with a few carefully planned loops. And once you can outmaneuver events like that, the prophecy starts to look less like fate and more like a suggestion the Order can root around with enough time travel and basic planning. I let you guys be the judge, but to me, a war that could have been rewound a few hours at a time starts to feel strangely optional. And if time travel makes the victory feel optional, the next plot hole might be even worse. Because it suggests Harry should have actually lost the final duel he wins. Massive plot hole, #2. The Elder Wand's loyalty makes Harry's victory impossible. Let's dive into it. We've just talked about how time travel makes the war feel strangely optional. But if time turners threaten the stakes of the whole story, the Elder Wand threatens the stakes of the final moment. Because if the Elder Wand works the way the book tells us it does, then Harry walking away from that last duel as the winner starts to look less like destiny and more like a straight-up plot hole. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. We're not just nitpicking a cool prop. The Elder Wand is one of the Deathly Hallows, supposedly the most powerful wand ever created. The unbeatable wand that has passed from wizard to wizard in blood and legend. In Deathly Hallows, it becomes the centerpiece of Voldemort's entire plan. He digs it out of Dumbledore's tomb. He believes that once he has it, once he breaks the old wand and raises this one, he's finally untouchable. That's the narrative weight we're dealing with. And the story tells us very specifically that this wand has rules. It has a kind of loyalty or allegiance. It doesn't just respond to whoever is holding it, it belongs to whoever defeated its previous master. That's the big twist. Voldemort has the wand, but he's not its true master. Draco becomes its master when he disarms Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower, and then Harry becomes its master when he later disarms Draco of a completely different wand at Malfoy Manor. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to think back to those earlier books, because this is where all that accumulated wand lore suddenly matters. But here's where the logic gets dangerous for the story. If wand allegiance can hop around that easily based on any defeat, then the entire series is full of duels, disarms, and stolen wands that should have triggered absolute chaos. Think about Harry yanking wands out of people's hands left and right. Think about every classroom duel, every Order skirmish, every Death Eater ambush. How many hidden wand masteries are we supposed to imagine silently reshuffling in the background that never get an explanation? I'd also argue that Deathly Hallows is asking us to suddenly care about a rule that, if retroactively applied, breaks half the magic system we thought we understood. And this isn't just a Deathly Hallows issue. Earlier books insist that wands choose the wizard, that emotional connection and compatibility are what really matter. Now we're told a wand can ignore its physical owner and pledge itself to someone who isn't even in the same room, purely because of a technical defeat. That's a massive shift in how magic is supposed to work. Quick pattern interrupt here. Picture the movie's final duel. Harry and Voldemort circling each other in the courtyard, spells colliding mid-air, cloaks whipping in slow motion. It's pure visual spectacle. But in the book, that same moment is a careful, almost legalistic explanation of wand ownership, priori incantatem history, and the Elder Wand's traveling allegiance. The film wants you to feel the emotion. The book wants you to track the mechanics. And those mechanics, if we follow them, suggest that Harry's win shouldn't be possible in the way it's presented. I'll let you guys be the judge, but before we dive into the exact chain of ownership, we need to trace how wand behavior across the whole series quietly sets this plot hole up. So, to figure out where the Elder Wand logic goes off the rails, we first have to remember how wands are supposed to work in the rest of the story. Wand lore is one of those things that feels mystical and emotional for 6 books, and then suddenly becomes a kind of legal contract in Deathly Hallows. I want to be clear about what I mean by that before we dive in. Back in Philosopher's Stone, Ollivander gives us the core rule. The wand chooses the wizard. Not, the wizard wins the wand in a duel. Not, the wand belongs to whoever is holding it. The implication is that wands are almost sentient, forming a bond based on compatibility, temperament, and magical potential. Harry's holly and phoenix feather wand doesn't just work, it works unusually well for him, throwing up those golden sparks in the shop and later producing that powerful connection in the graveyard. All through the early books, we see wands behaving in ways that reinforce this emotional bond. Harry struggles with other wands, like when he briefly uses Hermione's or the Blackthorn wand, the magic comes out, but it feels wrong, like wearing someone else's shoes. Voldemort's wand literally resists him when facing Harry because of the twin cores, producing priori incantatum instead of a straightforward killing curse. The message is clear: if the wand doesn't really choose you, you can still cast spells, but you're fighting the tool the whole time. Then, Deathly Hallows arrives and adds a new, harder-edged rule: wands can be won. Disarm or defeat a witch or wizard, and their wand's allegiance can shift to you. Ollivander explains this specifically to Harry, and it suddenly sounds very transactional. Losing your wand in combat isn't just inconvenient anymore, it might mean your most important magical tool has changed sides. It's a cool idea, but it complicates that earlier, more mystical picture quite a bit. Because if we look back, most wands do not behave like that all the time. Characters are disarmed constantly, without their wands permanently abandoning them. Harry and Draco disarm each other in the dueling club. Snape flicks wands out of people's hands like it's a hobby. The trio lose and regain wands during the Department of Mysteries fight. Yet we never get the sense that every single Expelliarmus is rewriting wand allegiance in the background. That would make half the series unreadable for sheer bookkeeping alone. I'd also argue that the books themselves quietly agree with this. Wand ownership seems to care about intent, about real defeat, not every dropped wand in a chaotic fight. But the rules for when that matters are never laid out with proper logic or explanation. And that's where the Elder Wand comes in. The Elder Wand is presented as the extreme case. It's still a wand, still supposedly following the same underlying principles, just more intensely tuned to power and conquest. It's the one wand that really does care who won it. But once we apply these fuzzy rules to a wand that decides the fate of the entire war, the contradictions start to pile up very quickly. In the next section, we need to track that chain of ownership step by careful step and see what actually holds together. So, let's do what the story never quite pauses to do, actually lay out the Elder Wand's resume. Because once we trace this thing step by step, the final duel starts to look a lot less inevitable and a lot more like a retrofitted explanation. First, the canonical chain. We're told that Grigorovich, the Wandmaker, somehow acquires the Elder Wand. Grindelwald then literally steals it from his workshop window. Years later, Dumbledore defeats Grindelwald in their legendary duel, and by the time we reach Half-Blood Prince, the Elder Wand is sitting quietly in Dumbledore's hand, disguised as just another wand. After that, Draco disarms Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower. Dumbledore dies, Voldemort raids the tomb, steals the wand from the coffin, and thinks that's the whole story. But it isn't, because of Malfoy Manor. There, Harry wrestles Draco's Hawthorn wand away from him. According to Dumbledore's own explanation in King's Cross, that casual disarm is the key moment, not the tower, not the tomb. That's the instant when the Elder Wand's allegiance quietly jumps from Draco to Harry, even though the Elder Wand is still buried with Dumbledore at that point. I want to be clear about what I mean by allegiance here. Dumbledore tells Harry that the Elder Wand is special because you don't have to kill its master, you just have to defeat them. And defeat, in this specific moment, has been reduced to something as small as Expelliarmus, or even physically yanking a wand away. No murder, no grand duel. Just a clean disarm, and the most powerful wand in history updates its internal settings. That means Draco Malfoy, for a brief window, is the true master of the Elder Wand without ever touching it. And then Harry becomes its master by disarming Draco of a completely different wand in a completely different house. That's an amazing twist on a first read, but if we apply even a little logic, it raises a huge plot hole. If the wand can sense defeat at a distance, why does physical possession matter at all? Why doesn't it just keep auto-updating every time its current master loses a duel, anywhere, against anyone? And once we go there, the history gets messy. Grindelwald stole it. Did that count as defeating Gregorovitch? If simple theft or a single disarm is enough, then in centuries of wizard dueling, how many accidental masters has this wand had? Wizards are constantly hexing, stunning, and disarming each other. Are we supposed to believe no one ever casually beat the current master without realizing they'd just inherited the deadliest wand in existence? I'd also argue that this creates an implicit contradiction with the rest of wand lore in the book. Every other wand cares about compatibility, emotion, and intent. Suddenly, this one cares about a hyper-technical combat rule that we've never been told to track before. If the Elder Wand follows one set of rules and all other wands follow another, where exactly is that line? The story never says. Instead, it reveals the rule only when it can conveniently explain why Voldemort loses. I'll let you guys be the judge of how satisfying that is, but in the next section we need to push this even further and ask if the Elder Wand's allegiance works this way. Does the final spell collision between Harry and Voldemort even make sense at all? So let's actually talk about that final spell, because this is where the Elder Wand plot hole stops being background lore and starts deciding who lives and who dies. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. The book's own explanation is pretty straightforward on the surface. Voldemort believes that by killing Snape, he's removing the last obstacle to mastering the Elder Wand. He thinks the wand's loyalty passed from Dumbledore to Snape when Snape killed him, so Snape has to die. But in reality, as the story later clarifies, Draco took the wand's allegiance when he disarmed Dumbledore. And then Harry took that allegiance from Draco by grabbing Draco's Hawthorn wand at Malfoy Manor. So when Voldemort casts Avada Kedavra in the Great Hall, the Elder Wand supposedly recognizes Harry as its true master and refuses to kill him. The spell rebounds, Voldemort dies, and destiny is fulfilled. It's a powerful moment. But if we follow that logic consistently, things get weird very fast. First, why does wand loyalty suddenly mean a literal magical backfire that kills the caster? We've seen divided loyalties before. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry uses Draco's wand and it works just fine. In Deathly Hallows, Ollivander talks about wands learning to serve new owners. None of those wands ever explode their spells back into someone's face just because they'd rather belong to another wizard. This isn't just a wand underperforming. It's a weapon turning around and shooting its owner in the heart. And it gets stranger when we remember that Voldemort has already used the Elder Wand several times. He breaks down the protective magic over Hogwarts, he duels McGonagall, he kills goblins and Death Eaters who annoy him. All of that works perfectly. If the wand is so loyal to Harry that it will not allow a killing curse to land on him, why is it totally fine blasting his allies, his teachers, and the defenders of Hogwarts? Does the wand have a very specific no Harry, everyone else is fair game setting that Dumbledore forgot to mention? I'd also argue that, taken seriously, the Elder Wand twist retroactively breaks a lot of earlier duels. Harry disarms Draco. Harry disarms Bellatrix in the Ministry. The trio disarm random Snatchers and Death Eaters all the time. If wand allegiance is this fragile and this mechanically important, shouldn't we be seeing constant chaotic betrayals? Wands refusing curses, misfiring jinxes, spells boomeranging back at their owners the moment someone loses a duel? That never happens. The series treats wand ownership as emotionally important, but not as a hard mechanical rule, until the exact convenient moment it needs to kill Voldemort. Hey everyone, welcome to another case where a cool twist quietly rewrites how magic works at the last second. If the Elder Wand can bend the rules of spellcasting in the finale, our next plot hole does the same thing for identity itself, and it makes the entire Ministry look incompetent in a way that's very hard to explain away. Massive plot hole number 3. Polyjuice Potion makes the Ministry's security a joke. This isn't just a nitpick about one scene. This is a problem that quietly eats away at the basic competence of the entire wizarding government, and once you see it, it's very hard to unsee. Before we dive in, let's quickly ground what Polyjuice actually does in the story. It's a potion that, with just a single hair or bit of someone's body, lets you perfectly mimic their physical appearance for about an hour. In the films, it even seems to copy their voice, which makes the deception even more complete. No complex spell work in the moment, no ongoing concentration. You drink, you change, you walk straight through someone else's life. We first see this used in Chamber of Secrets, when Harry and Ron use Polyjuice to sneak into the Slytherin common room. They're 12. They brew it in a bathroom. And once they've transformed, they just stroll into a rival house's private space, bypassing every social and magical safeguard Hogwarts supposedly has. The only reason it doesn't cause more damage is because the book needs it to be a contained, school-level adventure. Then the stakes escalate. In Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr. impersonates Mad-Eye Moody for an entire school year. He teaches classes, interacts with Dumbledore, attends meals, and is physically present at the very heart of Hogwarts' defenses. The explanation is, again, Polyjuice Potion. He has a supply. He has some hair. And that's apparently all it takes to sit in a position of enormous authority without anyone at the Ministry or Hogwarts having a reliable way to verify who he really is. By Deathly Hallows, the pattern is impossible to ignore. Harry, Ron, and Hermione use Polyjuice to infiltrate the Ministry itself, the central hub of wizarding law, security, and information. They walk in as Mafalda Hopkirk, Runcorn, and Catamole, and they get shockingly far before anything goes wrong. I'd also argue that this is one of the most important moments for understanding how the magic system undermines its own institutions. The trio are fugitives. The Ministry is under Voldemort's control, and yet, the thing that breaks the whole place open is the same school-level potion we saw back in Year 2. I want to be clear about what I mean by plot hole here. The issue isn't that characters use clever magic to deceive people. That's fun. The issue is that Polyjuice is shown to be accessible, repeatable, and extremely effective. and yet the world around it does not seem to react. If this potion exists, and everyone knows it exists, why aren't there robust anti-polyjuice protocols anywhere that matters? Where are the identity checks that can't be fooled by appearance? Why doesn't the ministry lean on things like Veritaserum, secure passwords, or magical signatures as a baseline? I'll let you guys be the judge of how far this goes, but once we start lining up examples, the logic of wizarding security starts to fall apart very quickly. And the wild part? Polyjuice isn't even the only magic that breaks their systems. But first, let's dive into how this one potion alone turns the ministry's supposed safeguards into a seemingly convenient illusion. So, if wizard security is already wobbling, Polyjuice Potion basically kicks the door in. This is one of those bits of magic that the story treats as normal background detail, but if we slow down for a moment and actually track how it's used, the plot hole potential is enormous. Let's start where the books really show us what it can do. Chamber of Secrets. Second year. Hermione Granger, who is brilliant but still 12, brews an advanced month-long potion in a bathroom. No supervision, no license, no ministry alarms. Harry and Ron then stroll into the Slytherin common room as Crabbe and Goyle, and nothing in Hogwarts' supposedly ancient, well-protected castle even tries to verify their identities. No wards, no portraits reacting, no magical roll call. Draco just accepts them, because they look right. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. The entire security system boils down to close enough. Fast forward to Goblet of Fire and the magic scales up, but the logic doesn't. Barty Crouch Jr. impersonates Mad-Eye Moody for almost an entire school year. He teaches classes, duels students, drinks with Hagrid, and has multiple private conversations with Dumbledore. This isn't a 5-minute infiltration, this is long-term identity theft. And again, no systematic checks, no periodic Veritaserum from the ministry, no staff-level enchantment that pings if someone's body doesn't match their magical signature. We're told Polyjuice is standard enough for Hermione to find in a library book, yet nobody has built even basic countermeasures around it. By Deathly Hallows, the books lean into Polyjuice as a tool, but that only makes the world-building questions louder. The Ministry Break-In is one of the most secure locations in the wizarding world, under Voldemort's control, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione just walk in as random employees. They get a couple of lifts, one slightly suspicious security desk, and that's basically it. No enchanted ID badges checking core magic, no wards that strip disguises, no Dementor sniff test for fear or intent. It's dramatic in the moment, but it makes the entire institution feel weirdly fragile. Then, we have the Battle of the Seven Potters. The Order and the Death Eaters both treat Polyjuice as a completely valid way to scramble identification. 6 fake Harrys, 1 real one, and everyone agrees this is at least a plausible strategy. I'd also argue that this quietly confirms how reliable the potion is in universe. Nobody worries the copies will flicker or glitch, the risk is the ambush, not the disguise. Put all of this together, and Polyjuice isn't some quirky side potion. It's reliable, repeatable, and known to every major faction. I'll let you guys be the judge, but once that's true, how does any trial, election, or even simple arrest work without constant doubt? And the wild thing is, Polyjuice is still small potatoes compared to other magic that can bypass rules entirely. Hey everyone, welcome to another escalation of broken systems, because next we need to talk about time travel and why the books quietly shove it off stage, and if Polyjuice already makes every arrest and election feel unstable. It quietly raises a bigger question. Why doesn't the entire wizarding world look completely different? We're told this potion is complicated, sure, but it's also common enough for school kids to brew in a bathroom and for the ministry to hand out for undercover missions. If anyone can impersonate anyone else for an hour with a single hair, then the real plot hole isn't just a risky mission plan. It's the total absence of systemic safeguards. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. In a world that takes Polyjuice seriously, the first thing you'd expect is infrastructure. Standard anti-Polyjuice wards on every ministry door. Hair verification charms at every courtroom entrance. Magical identity tokens for auras and high-ranking officials. Imagine Gringotts-level checks as the everyday baseline. Instead, the Wizengamot, Aura headquarters, even the minister's office all seem to rely on visual recognition and trust. You show up looking like yourself, people shrug and go, "Yep, that's him." That's wild. And Hogwarts might be the most absurd example. This is a school that has been infiltrated by a Death Eater pretending to be Mad-Eye Moody, 2 Weasley twins pretending to be old men, and an entire squad of Slytherins pretending to be Harry. Yet there is no routine magical authentication for students, no daily scan for transfiguration or Polyjuice, nothing beyond teachers recognizing faces in the corridor. For a castle with moving staircases and sentient paintings, the security culture is basically, we'll know if something's wrong. Will you though? What makes this even more glaring is that we know wizards can build sophisticated systems when the story wants them to. Veritaserum exists, even if it's heavily regulated. Legilimency exists, and Snape can rifle through your memories at will. The Patronus charm can carry voice messages over distance like a glowing, silvery text. So the magic and the logic for complex verification clearly exist. And yet, when it comes to Polyjuice, the books lean on seemingly convenient forgetfulness. No standard countermeasures, no dedicated detection charms, just vibes. If we follow the rules instead of the narrative convenience, Wizarding Society would need a complete redesign. Secure areas would require regular identity checks, not once a year, but constantly. High-profile figures would be scanned for ongoing transfiguration or potion effects before every meeting. Impersonation via Polyjuice would be a top-tier crime, with specialized teams trained to detect subtle residue, behavioral anomalies, or magical signatures. Auras would spend as much time verifying who people are as they do dueling dark wizards. I'd also argue that once you accept this, it starts to erode the fantasy of wizards as competent rulers of their own world. If they can't even design institutions that survive a bottle of potion and a stolen hair, how stable is anything we're shown? And the truly uncomfortable part is that Polyjuice might not even be the worst offender. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to brace yourself, because house elf magic doesn't just break wizard security. Next, let's dive into it and ask whether it breaks wizard power itself. Massive plot hole number 4. Dobby proves wizards aren't actually in charge. This is the moment where the hierarchy of the entire wizarding world starts to wobble. Because once we really look at house elf magic, the story's power structure doesn't just crack a little. It practically flips upside down. Hey everyone, welcome to another section where we take something that seems charming or quirky on the surface and ask what happens if we actually follow the logic all the way through. We've talked about Polygus making identity weirdly fragile. Now, we need to talk about the creatures who can walk straight through the protections everyone else is terrified of. I want to be clear about what I mean by house elf magic here. I don't just mean that Dobby can click his fingers and clean a kitchen a bit faster than Molly Weasley. I mean the specific, high-stakes moments where elves ignore rules that are supposed to be absolute. Dobby apparates into the hospital wing at Hogwarts, a place that is explicitly protected against wizard apparition. He later grabs Harry and side-apparates him out of Malfoy Manor, again bypassing anti-apparition wards that keep fully trained adult wizards trapped. And this isn't just a Dobby thing. Kreacher apparates in and out of Grimmauld Place, which is not only unplottable, but also the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, layered with Fidelius and every defensive charm they can think of. Yet Kreacher can vanish directly from Hogwarts to the middle of that fortress and back with a snap. No wand, no incantation, no visible strain. The book treats this as a convenient way to move the plot along, but if we stop and think, the implications are enormous. Because house elves don't just do wandless magic, they do magic that directly contradicts the limitations placed on wizard magic. Wizards can't apparate on Hogwarts grounds, elves can. Wizards rely on unplottable locations, Fidelius, and anti-apparition wards to stay hidden. Elves treat those as suggestions at best. I'd also argue that once we accept this, every supposedly secure base in Deathly Hallows on both sides suddenly looks more like an open plan office. That sets up a really uncomfortable tension. If house elves can ignore unplottable protections, anti-apparition charms, and other supposedly unbreakable defenses, why isn't the Second Wizarding War shaped around that fact? Why aren't both Voldemort and the Order running entire strategies around elf reconnaissance, elf extractions, and elf sabotage? At minimum, why isn't there a single conversation where someone says, "Wait, can Dobby just pop in there and grab the Horcrux?" Pattern interrupt for a second. Imagine an alternate Deathly Hallows where the main resistance isn't the Order at all, but organized house elf cells. Elves apparating into Death Eater meetings, stealing wands mid-sentence, relocating prisoners out of Azkaban, sabotaging the Ministry from inside every office, all while wizards are still arguing about who controls the Flu network. It sounds almost comedic, but it also exposes how underused this magic really is. I'll let you guys be the judge of whether that's a plot hole or just an unexplored corner of the world, but Deathly Hallows never really gives us an in-universe explanation. Next, we need to push this even further and ask what happens when you combine that kind of broken magic with something even more dangerous: time itself. And speaking of magic that feels almost frighteningly open-ended, we need to talk about house elves. Because once you line up what they can actually do, a lot of the big protective rules in this world start to look optional. Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive into the weirder corners of Harry Potter logic, and this time we're zeroing in on Dobby, Kreacher, and the quiet apocalypse that is house elf magic. Let's dive into it. We start with Dobby in Chamber of Secrets. On the surface, he's comic relief and a walking guilt trip for Harry. But look at the specific moments. First, he intercepts Harry's letters all summer. That means he can locate, access and tamper with private wizard mail with no wand, no trace, and apparently no difficulty. Then, he seals the barrier to Platform 9. This is a major magical junction tied to the Ministry and the Hogwarts Express, and a single house elf just shuts it down. No spell incantation, no visible wand work, just a snap of his fingers and an entire transport system is bricked. Then we get the hospital wing scene. Hogwarts is supposed to be protected against apparition. We're told this over and over as an important rule. Yet Dobby apparates right into Harry's bed, chats, snaps his fingers, and vanishes again. I want to be clear about what I mean by protected against apparition here. Either the anti-apparition jinx only applies to humans, which the books never say, or house elves are operating on a completely different magical protocol that ignores standard wards. Either way, that's a massive loophole. Creature doubles down on this in Order of the Phoenix and Deathly Hallows. Grimmauld Place is unplottable, hidden by the Fidelius charm, and layered with black family protections. It is, by design, the paranoid wizard equivalent of a bunker. Creature still apparates in and out, even when the Order is trying to control information. Later, he and Dobby both apparate in and out of Hogwarts during the war, including in Deathly Hallows when Dobby pulls off that rescue from Malfoy Manor and then jumps to Shell Cottage. These are some of the most heavily warded locations in the story, and house elves treat them like open doors. On top of that, their everyday magic is absurdly strong. They cook, clean and repair at scale, they can defend themselves, they can physically overpower wizards, and they do it all wandlessly. Their loyalty bonds seem to interact with ownership-based protections in a way wizards can't replicate. If a house elf's master is tied to a place or object, the elf can often bypass the locks. That's how Creature can follow Regulus's orders years after his death, and how Dobby can sabotage the Malfoys' plans from inside their own protections. I'd also argue that both Dumbledore and Voldemort massively underutilize this. Dumbledore has access to the Hogwarts elves and basically uses them for catering. Voldemort enslaves creatures but never builds a strategic core of house elves who can bypass wards, steal information, or assassinate targets. In a war defined by wards, Fidelius, and you can't apparate here, the side that controls the beings who ignore all of that should win. And the books never give us a clear limiting rule for any of this. We have Gamp's Law for food, the Trace for underage magic, and all kinds of technical explanations for wands, but house elf magic just exists. No costs, no cooldowns, no stated boundaries. Is there anything they can't do if ordered strongly enough? The story doesn't say, and that silence is almost more unsettling than any explicit rule. I'll let you guys be the judge of whether that's a full-blown plot hole or just a wildly underexplored system, but it becomes really important once we start talking about the one kind of magic that absolutely does have hard rules: time travel. Because if elves can bypass protections in the present, what would it mean if someone like Dumbledore had combined that with a time turner? Which brings us to the other half of that equation. If time travel is tightly controlled, house elves basically aren't. And that creates a different kind of problem. Because even without time turners, there's a group in this world that can already ignore most of the rules wizards spend 7 books treating as absolute. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. The books establish over and over that house elves can apparate in and out of places where wizards simply cannot. Hogwarts is supposed to be locked down. Grimmauld Place is unplottable and protected by the Fidelius charm. Malfoy Manor is described as a secure Death Eater base. Yet elves pop in and out of these locations with no wand, no incantation, and no visible strain. If that's true, then both Voldemort and the Order are, from a pure strategy perspective, ignoring their most effective operatives. Let's dive into it. Imagine the Order actually organizes the Hogwarts elves the way they organize the Seven Potters' plan. An invisible strike team apparates directly into Malfoy Manor's drawing room during a Death Eater meeting. They don't need brooms, portkeys or polyjuice. They just arrive, grab wands, drop chandeliers, stun or bind people with whatever bizarre elf magic they use on Aunt Petunia's pudding, and then disapparate with prisoners and evidence. How do you defend against enemies who can't be tracked, blocked, or disarmed in the usual way? And we don't even have to imagine it entirely, because Dobby does a solo version of this. He infiltrates Malfoy Manor, bypasses all the supposedly terrifying protections, and rescues Harry, Ron, Hermione, Luna, Dean, Ollivander, and Griphook in one go. That is a massive tactical victory. If one free elf can do that on his own, what happens if you have 10? Or the entire Hogwarts kitchen staff? At that point, the war starts to look less like a clash of wands and more like wizards arguing while their servants could have ended things last Tuesday. Now, the usual explanation is cultural conditioning and magical binding. Elves are enslaved, they're compelled to obey, they're terrified of breaking rules. And that's important thematically. But even inside the story, that explanation doesn't fully close the plot hole. Dobby repeatedly disobeys the Malfoys. Winky's alcoholism and grief show she has complex moral judgment and intense personal loyalty. Kreacher goes from actively sabotaging Harry to leading a house elf charge in the Battle of Hogwarts once his loyalties shift. So the magic isn't an unbreakable hard rule, it's flexible enough that, under the right conditions, elves can choose. I'd also argue that once Dumbledore, the Order, or even Voldemort sees Dobby's Malfoy Manor rescue, the "we just didn't think of it" explanation stops working. You've now witnessed proof that elves can crack your most secure locations. Why isn't every subsequent plan built around that? I'll let you guys be the judge of how damaging that is, but it quietly undercuts the whole idea that wizards are the apex of magical power. And if that hierarchy is already unstable, our last plot hole goes even deeper, because it questions whether killing Voldemort actually solved the Horcrux problem at all. So, if wizards might not actually be at the top of the magical food chain, that raises a bigger, darker question. What happens when the magic that's supposed to defeat Voldemort doesn't quite work the way the book tells us it does? Let's dive into it. Massive plot hole number 5. Horcrux logic means Harry might not be the last piece. This is our final, and easily our most conceptually messy problem, because it doesn't just poke at tactics or ministry policy, it quietly leans on the emotional core of Deathly Hallows. The idea that Harry's sacrifice ends Voldemort once and for all. Before we dive in too deep, we should quickly remind ourselves what Horcruxes actually are in the story. A Horcrux is an object that contains a fragment of a witch or wizard's soul, ripped away through murder and anchored with some very dark magic. As long as at least one Horcrux survives, the creator can't truly die. Their body can be destroyed, but their soul can't move on, which is why Voldemort comes back from that half-life after Godric's Hollow. By Deathly Hallows, we're working with a pretty clear inventory. The Diary from Chamber of Secrets, the Gaunt Ring, Slytherin's Locket, Hufflepuff's Cup, Ravenclaw's Diadem, Nagini the Snake, and of course the accidental fragment lodged in Harry when the killing curse rebounded. Dumbledore gives us that neat explanation about Voldemort wanting his soul split into 7 parts, because 7 is the most powerfully magical number. It sounds clean, it sounds mythic. It's also where the math starts to wobble. I want to be clear about what I mean by wobble here. The book never actually lays out the rules of soul division in a systematic way. Does every murder create a new fragment by default, or only when you perform the Horcrux ritual at the same time? Is there a hard cap on how many pieces your soul can be split into before you just stop being functional? And when a Horcrux is destroyed, what precisely happens to that soul shard? Does it snap back into the main soul? Does it vanish? Does it weaken the creator in some measurable way? We get hints, but not real explanation. Slughorn talks about splitting the soul like you're cutting a cake, but he never specifies whether you're slicing from what's left in the body or from some abstract total. Dumbledore implies Voldemort overshoots his own plan, yet never walks Harry through the exact count. And the magic surrounding Harry's scar, the piece in him, and the final killing curse in the forest is treated more like prophecy fulfillment than strict soul arithmetic. I'd also argue that these ambiguities matter a lot more than they first appear to. Depending on how we interpret the rules, Voldemort's defeat might not be as clean or complete as the ending suggests. Did destroying each Horcrux truly bring him closer to mortality, or did we just assume that because the characters believed it? I'll let you guys be the judge as we unpack the soul math, because the numbers and the logic really don't seem to add up. So let's talk about how Horcruxes are supposed to work before we accuse the story of breaking its own rules. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. We're not inventing new headcanon yet, we're just taking Dumbledore's own explanation in Half-Blood Prince as our baseline and seeing what the internal logic actually demands. When Harry and Dumbledore are in the hospital wing, Dumbledore lays it out. Voldemort has deliberately split his soul and hidden those pieces in objects so that even if his body is destroyed, he survives as long as at least one fragment is still anchored to the world. That's the core explanation. Destroy the body, and you get the wraith we see in Goblet of Fire. Destroy the Horcruxes, and you remove those extra lives so that when the body dies, there's nothing left to cling on. But Rowling adds a very specific twist. Voldemort isn't just making a random number of Horcruxes, he's aiming for 7 pieces of soul, because 7 is the most powerfully magical number. Dumbledore literally walks Harry through it on the ring, 1 piece in Voldemort's body and 6 others hidden away, for a total of 7. That implies a kind of soul math. Voldemort is not just immortal, he's trying to be symmetrically, numerologically immortal. And crucially, this isn't automatic. Each Horcrux requires murder plus a complicated secret ritual. Slughorn tells Tom Riddle that the act of murder rips the soul, but you still have to perform dark magic to trap that torn piece in an object. In other words, souls don't just shatter every time a wizard kills someone in a duel. Voldemort chooses when to split, and he chooses where that fragment goes. There's control, planning, and intention baked into the magic. From that explanation flows the entire structure of Deathly Hallows. The narrative treats the destruction of each Horcrux as a necessary step on a checklist to make Voldemort mortal again. Diary, ring, locket, cup, diadem, Nagini, and finally the fragment inside Harry. The tension comes from the idea that if even one survives, Voldemort can't truly die. Harry's self-sacrifice in the forest is framed as the final heroic act that removes the last fragment and leaves Voldemort fully killable. On paper, that sounds tight. I'd also argue that emotionally it absolutely works. But when we look back at Dumbledore's explanation, something important is missing. At no point does the book give us a precise, mechanical rule for how many fragments exist at any moment, how big those fragments are, or what happens when the main body dies while Horcruxes are still out there. Do the pieces recombine? Does the main piece even exist in a meaningful way anymore? We're never told. That vagueness is where the plot hole pressure starts to build. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to remember the diary, which behaved like almost a whole second Voldemort. Was that 1/7 of a soul or something else entirely? I'll let you guys be the judge, because in the next section we're going to push this soul math to its breaking point and see what it does to Harry's role as the so-called final Horcrux. So let's actually talk about that soul math, because this is where the story quietly stops adding up. We're told Voldemort wants his soul in 7 parts. Sounds neat, sounds mystical, sounds very Dark Lord with a plan. But when you slow down and apply basic logic, the numbers start slipping through our fingers. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. The book implies a simple equation. Voldemort begins with 1 whole soul, then makes 6 Horcruxes, ending up with 7 pieces total. But how does that division work? Is his body the original piece and each Horcrux a clean slice, like cutting a pie into 7? Or does every new Horcrux creation carve up what's left, making smaller and smaller fragments each time? The story never specifies, and that's important, because it affects how complete each Horcrux actually is, and it gets messier. We're told murder tears the soul, not Horcrux making specifically. Murder, Voldemort kills people long before his first Horcrux, and keeps killing people long after he thinks he's done at 7. So, if every killing curses the soul, are there extra, unintended fragments just floating around? Did he accidentally create wild Horcrux-level shards without an object to anchor them? The books never even try to give us an explanation for that, which is a pretty big gap when the entire final act of the story is built on the supposed completeness of this checklist. Here's the pattern interrupt. What actually happens when you destroy a Horcrux? We see the diary stabbed, the ring cracked, the locket blasted, the cup melted, the diadem burned, Nagini decapitated. But on the soul level, are we annihilating that fragment forever? Or does it snap back to whatever is left of Voldemort's main soul like a very cursed rubber band? If it returns, does it make him more stable, less monstrous, easier or harder to kill? The magic never gets defined, and I'd also argue that's a problem once we're meant to believe the rules are airtight. Then we add Harry, the accidental Horcrux. The entire numerology collapses right there. Voldemort wants 7 parts, but by the time he attacks the Potters, he's already made multiple Horcruxes. That stray fragment latching onto Harry makes at least 8. So either Voldemort is wrong about his own soul, or Dumbledore is, or the 7 is just a thematic flourish we're treating like hard logic. And yet, in the climax, everyone behaves as if the math is perfect. All Horcruxes are gone. Therefore, Voldemort can die. Full stop. No margin of error, no hidden shards, no ambiguity about what killing each fragment actually does. Given how fuzzy the rules of soul division and recombination are, that certainty starts to feel a little convenient. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to keep watching, because in the next section we're going to ask whether Harry's death in the forest really solved anything, or if the war might still be hanging on a technicality. So let's actually talk about that forest scene, because this is where the whole Horcrux plot hole suddenly becomes emotional. Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest, lets Voldemort hit him with the killing curse, and wakes up in King's Cross Limbo with Dumbledore and that awful flayed baby thing on the floor. We're told that Kreacher is the fragment of Voldemort's soul that was living inside Harry, finally ripped free and left to suffer. In the book, this moment is framed as the big reset button. The Horcrux inside Harry is gone, Harry has died for everyone at Hogwarts, and when he chooses to go back, he returns supposedly free of that parasite. From this point on, the story treats Voldemort as fully mortal again, provided that Nagini is killed and no other Horcruxes survive. The final duel is sold to us as a fair fight between two ordinary, if extremely powerful, wizards whose lives are both genuinely on the line. I want to be clear about what I mean by fair here. Not fair emotionally, because Harry has been traumatized for 7 books. Fair in the magical sense. No extra lives, no hidden save points, no secret Horcrux hiding in Harry's scar. The narrative really leans on that feeling of closure, which is important for the ending to land. But does that actually follow from the rules the series itself set up? We've seen Horcruxes destroyed before. The diary is stabbed with a basilisk fang in Chamber of Secrets. The ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, Nagini, each one is destroyed without Voldemort dropping dead on the spot. The whole point of a Horcrux is that the main soul can survive while fragments are being shattered. So, if one soul piece can be annihilated while the rest of the soul keeps going, what guarantees that Harry's death in the forest is the final necessary step to make Voldemort mortal again? Specifically, we're asked to accept that Dumbledore's soul math is perfect. 7 intended Horcruxes, 1 accidental, all now accounted for. But Voldemort has a long history of murder, and the books are maddeningly vague about how precise this magic really is. Did every killing neatly divide his soul into exactly the right portions? Could an especially vicious murder have torn off an extra shred he didn't even notice? I'd also argue that his soul is described as so damaged that it's basically beyond normal human categories. If that's true, then even once Harry's piece is gone and the known Horcruxes are destroyed, what's to stop some stray fragment from clinging on somewhere, in some diminished half-conscious state? Maybe it's not enough for a full resurrection, but enough for a whisper, a haunting, accursed object that keeps his will alive. I'll let you guys be the judge of whether that's satisfying or whether it quietly undercuts the finality of his defeat. And this is where all the other cracks start to line up. If time travel, wand lore, identity magic, house elf power, and soul logic all strain the story's internal rules, then we have to ask a bigger question. What does that actually mean for how we read Harry Potter? As a tight, logical system, or as something much stranger? Let's dive into it in the next section. So when we zoom out, those cracks stop being isolated weird moments and start looking like a whole different picture. We're not just talking about one spell, or one duel, or one convenient oversight. We're talking about the foundations of how this magic system is supposed to work. In one sentence each, here's what we've actually uncovered. Time turners make the entire war feel optional, because someone could have gone back and prevented key deaths or even Voldemort's return. Elder Wand logic quietly undermines the final duel, because by its own rules, Harry shouldn't necessarily win that showdown in the Great Hall. Polyjuice Potion breaks security, since any hair plus an hour equals a perfect infiltrator in a world that barely seems to have ID checks. House elves bypass protections, walking straight through wards that are framed as unbreakable wizarding fortresses. And Horcrux math clouds Voldemort's defeat, because the numbers and rules around soul fragments never fully line up with the final victory. On their own, each of these has an explanation if we really want one. There are fan theories about the Department of Mysteries smashing all the time turners, about subtle wand lore we just don't see on the page, about Polyjuice being hard to brew, about elves having special exceptions, about Dumbledore simplifying Horcrux theory for Harry. I want to be clear about what I mean by pattern here. I'm not saying there is zero possible explanation. I'm saying the book repeatedly introduces incredibly powerful systems and then quietly forgets, limits, or nerfs them the moment they would derail the story it wants to tell. Once we let those systems talk to each other, the logic strain ramps up. Imagine combining time turners with house elf infiltration. Send a loyal elf back a few hours with orders to apparate into any unplottable hideout, grab a wand, sabotage a ritual, or rescue a target before the Death Eaters even arrive. Or take Polyjuice and Veritaserum together. In theory, the Ministry could run perfect espionage and perfect interrogation under cover auras slipping into meetings. Then legally verified truth serum to expose everyone later. Would the Death Eaters really last long against that kind of institutional magic? And then there's Horcrux knowledge plus time travel. If Dumbledore or the Order ever got their hands on a time turner after learning about Horcruxes, they could jump back to Tom Riddle's Hogwarts years, track the diary or the ring before they're hidden, and preempt the entire immortality plan. At that point, it's not just one plot hole, it's a whole alternate series quietly sitting behind the one we read. I'd also argue that this doesn't actually ruin Harry Potter, but it does change how we think about it. Instead of a tightly consistent magical rulebook, the story starts to look more like an emotionally driven myth, where the magic flexes around themes of love, sacrifice, and choice. I let you guys be the judge of whether that trade-off works for you, because it's an important shift in how we read every big moment. And in the next section, we're going to lean into that. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to keep watching, because we'll talk about how fans can still love, question, and play with this world, even when we can see every seam in the spellwork. Let's dive into it. So let's sit with that for a second, because this is where things get personal. For a lot of us, Harry Potter isn't just a book series. It's childhood sleepovers, midnight releases, the first time we cried over a fictional death and realized stories could actually matter to us in a life-shaping way. That means when someone points at a plot hole, it can feel less like, here's a weird bit of magic logic, and more like, here's why your younger self was wrong. And that stings. I want to be clear about what I mean by criticism here. We're not saying you were foolish to love these books. We're saying the wizarding world, like every fictional world, has seams. Noticing them doesn't erase the comfort, the nostalgia, or the identity you built around it. In fact, I'd also argue that seeing the cracks can deepen our appreciation. When we notice that time-turners could have saved countless lives but are quietly written out, or that house elf magic makes most wizard security feel a bit silly, we're really noticing what the story prioritizes. It isn't a physics textbook for magic. It's a narrative obsessed with love, sacrifice, and choosing what's right over what's easy, even when the internal explanation is, let's say, flexible. Think about the ending of Deathly Hallows. Does Harry walking into the forest work because the Elder Wand rules are crystal clear, or because the emotional truth of that moment lands so hard that most of us don't stop to run soul math on the Horcrux situation until years later? The mechanics wobble, but the character arc hits. That contrast actually tells us what this story cares about most. And this isn't unique to Harry Potter. Star Wars has the Death Star exhaust port, which is basically a giant "please blow me up" button. Superhero comics are full of secret identities that collapse the second anyone buys a pair of glasses and pays attention. Fandoms haven't abandoned those worlds. They've memed them, patched them with fan theories, and written whole novels of fanfic to reconcile the convenient bits with the deeper themes. So when we talk about plot hole analysis, we're not advocating joyless nitpicking. We're talking about engaged reading. We're taking the text seriously enough to test its claims about how its own magic and politics work. Hey everyone, welcome to another version of loving something so much that you're willing to argue with it. That's a kind of respect, not rejection. I'll let you guys be the judge of how far you want to go with that. You can hold two truths at once. The wizarding world doesn't fully make sense, and it still means the world to millions of people, including us making this video. And before we dive into our next big example, we're going to push that tension even further and ask what happens when fan explanations start doing more work than the books themselves. Let's dive into it. So if the books aren't doing all the work, who is? In this case, it's the fandom. And this is where things get really interesting, because the more we pull on these plot hole threads, the more we start leaning on headcanon just to keep the story standing. Let's start with time-turners. The popular fanfics says they only work for short windows, maybe a few hours, and that extended use scrambles your mind or the timeline. Some people add that the Ministry quietly realized this and destroyed them long before the Department of Mysteries fiasco. Now the book does give us a tiny bit. McGonagall warns Hermione about being seen, and the Ministry keeps them tightly controlled. But there is nothing on page about brain-melting overuse, or hard caps on how far back you can go. That's fandom logic trying to rescue why nobody goes back for James, Lily, or even Cedric. I'd also argue that once your explanation is more detailed than the actual rules in Prisoner of Azkaban, we've crossed from interpretation into fan patch notes. The Elder Wand gets the same treatment. A common headcanon is that it only reacts dramatically when its true master is directly threatened, which explains why it doesn't start zapping random duelists across history. Another version says its loyalty is really about intent. You have to be actively trying to dominate or defeat the owner, not just accidentally disarm them in a classroom scuffle. That would smooth over moments like Draco disarming Dumbledore without even knowing about the wand. But again, the book itself, especially in Deathly Hallows, leans on a much simpler rule. Defeat equals mastery. Dumbledore's speeches don't mention only if your heart really means it. So these fixes feel elegant, but they're not actually text-supported. Polyjuice has its own defense squad. One camp argues there are anti-polyjuice wards, but they're rare, complicated, or incredibly expensive to maintain. Another group just says the ministry is incompetent, which, to be fair, is very on brand. Does that match the tone? Mostly, the series specifically shows us a government that is reactive, image-obsessed, and easily infiltrated. So they never built a robust identity system actually feels like less of a stretch than some of the more elaborate magical tech headcanons. House elves are trickier. Fans talk about deep-rooted magical binding, cultural indoctrination, or ancient contracts that literally limit their ability to act against wizard masters. That lines up with how Winky and Creature talk about loyalty. But then we have Dobby, who rebels, disobeys orders, and later uses his magic to break into places wizards can't. If one elf can push against the binding that hard, why don't more of them? I want to be clear about what I mean by tricky here. Any explanation that makes Dobby possible also makes large-scale elf resistance possible, and the books never show that. Then we have Horcrux theories. Maybe soul fragmentation has diminishing returns, so each extra slice is weaker. Maybe unintended fragments, like the one in Harry, are unstable and would have dissipated eventually. Or Dumbledore is simplifying everything for Harry's sake, giving him a usable mission rather than a metaphysical lecture. Of these, the Dumbledore is curating the truth angle fits the character and the tone best. But it also quietly admits the books aren't giving us the full rulebook, and that's the pattern. These headcanons are clever, often beautiful, and sometimes more consistent than the canon explanations. But at a certain point, we have to ask, are we defending the story or rewriting it? I'll let you guys be the judge as we move into our next section and look at what happens when those fanfixes start to clash with each other instead of the plot holes they were meant to solve. And that clash between fanfixes is exactly where another layer of chaos walks in. The author herself. Because at a certain point, we're not just debating headcanons anymore, we're debating tweets, interviews, and stage plays that showed up years after the last book hit shelves. Hey everyone, welcome to another moment where Harry Potter's magic system quietly melts under the weight of its own success. Let's dive into it by talking about something lit theory people call death of the author. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. It doesn't mean we ignore J.K. Rowling as a person or pretend she didn't write the story. It means that once the book is published, the text on the page becomes the main authority for meaning and rules. Author intentions and later explanations are interesting, but they don't automatically overwrite what we actually read. Harry Potter might be the most famous modern test case for this. We have Rowling's comments about time turners being all destroyed in Order of the Phoenix, mostly because she realized they broke the plot. We have the infamous wizard toilets explanation, retroactively telling us that for centuries wizards just went on the floor and vanished it. We have Dumbledore's sexuality revealed after the series, which many readers felt was meaningful representation, while others pointed out that the text itself never commits to it. Each of these moments landed differently with fans. Some people embraced them as added depth, others saw them as patches slapped onto a finished structure. I'd also argue that the tension gets sharpest when these explanations don't just add detail, but contradict established logic. Time turners are the clearest example. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the book shows us a working time travel system with seemingly huge potential. Later, the explanation is basically, Don't worry, they're all gone. Please stop asking why no one saved James and Lily. That's not a fix. That's the story trying to politely close the door on its own plot hole. The same thing happens with Horcruxes and the Elder Wand. Rowling has given interviews and website answers trying to clarify Horcrux soul math and why Harry only has to die once. She's also tried to explain how Elder Wand allegiance jumps from Dumbledore to Draco to Harry in a way that makes the final duel feel earned. But the book itself establishes rules about wand loyalty, intent, and murder that make Voldemort's defeat feel, at best, extremely convenient. When the on-page logic says one thing and the later commentary says, well, actually, it works like this, the dissonance doesn't disappear. We just notice it more. I'll let you guys be the judge of how much weight those outside explanations should carry. Because next, we're going to look at what happens when you reread or rewatch with all of this in mind. Once you've seen the cracks, how much of Deathly Hallows can you actually experience the same way again? Once you've seen those cracks, you can't really unsee them. Rereading the series becomes a different experience. Not necessarily worse, but sharper, more layered, and sometimes a lot funnier than it was the first time around. Take Prisoner of Azkaban and the Time Turner. On a first read, it's a cool time travel twist, and then we move on. On a reread, the moment McGonagall casually hands Hermione a device that can rewrite hours of history suddenly feels like a ticking bomb under the rest of the story. We watch Dumbledore in Order of the Phoenix let the Ministry fall apart, and we can't help thinking, you had a literal time machine and you used it, so Hermione could take extra classes? That unused potential hangs over every later death, and every there was nothing we could do speech. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. It's not that we expect Dumbledore to constantly break time. But once the book shows us this branch of magic exists and then smashes all the time turners off screen, every big tragedy gets a new layer of tension. Are these noble sacrifices, or is this a headmaster quietly deciding the timeline is more important than individual lives? I'll let you guys be the judge, but it does change how those scenes play. Something similar happens with the Elder Wand. The first time through Deathly Hallows, the Malfoy Manor escape is already intense. But we might not linger on the exact moment Harry rips Draco's wand away. On a reread, knowing that this seemingly convenient scuffle is the pivot for the most important wand in history, that scene suddenly becomes huge. We're replaying the logic in our heads. Does wand allegiance really jump just because Harry disarmed Draco of a different wand? Does the Elder Wand have a little internal scoreboard we've never heard about before? The explanation is shaky, but it retroactively turns that corridor duel into one of the most consequential beats in the entire book. Then there's Polyjuice and House Elf magic. Once we understand how absurdly powerful both are, the Ministry, Hogwarts, even Grimmauld Place start to feel porous. We watch Death Eaters stroll into the Ministry while the good guys almost never use Polyjuice for large-scale infiltration, and it makes the institution's security look laughable. At the same time, Dobby apparates into places that are supposedly unplottable and locked against apparition, which makes every this location is completely protected speech sound unintentionally comedic. It's like the story keeps insisting on locked doors while house elves are just walking through the walls. And yet, when we get to the big emotional moments, a lot of it still lands. Harry walking into the forest, Molly taking down Bellatrix, Neville beheading Nagini. Even if we're mentally cataloguing inconsistencies in the background, those scenes are built on character, not just magic logic, and they actually hold up remarkably well. So here's where I'd really love your help. As you reread or rewatch with these 5 big plot hole areas in mind, which scenes feel the most different to you now? Drop them in the comments so this becomes a kind of communal rereading project, because next we're going to zoom out and ask what all of this does to the legacy of Deathly Hallows as a finale. So if certain scenes suddenly feel different now, the next step is to ask, different how? Not all plot holes do the same kind of damage. Some just make us raise an eyebrow. Others, at least on paper, could rewrite the entire war. I want to be clear about what I mean by damage here, because this is where people's rankings really start to split. For this video, we're looking at 3 things. First, how many events a given plot hole touches. Does it change one duel or the whole timeline? Second, does it alter who plausibly lives or dies, like whether Dobby needed to die at all, or whether Harry ever had to walk into the forest? And third, does it undercut a core theme of the story, specifically ideas like sacrifice, courage, and the cost of war? If a convenient bit of magic quietly erases that cost, the damage level shoots way up. On that scale, time turners pretty much have to sit near the top. In Prisoner of Azkaban, we watch Hermione casually rewrite several hours of reality. If that magic exists, and the Order of the Phoenix never even tries to raid the Ministry's stores to stop Voldemort's return, then almost every major death from Cedric to Fred to Lupin starts to look like a choice rather than an inevitability. That doesn't just poke at the logic of the book, it brushes right up against the theme that sometimes you can't save everyone. With time turners, you actually can, and the story simply chooses not to talk about it. Right next to that, I'd also argue that Horcrux logic and soul math are equally catastrophic. If the explanation of how many fragments exist is fuzzy, then Harry's one death fixes everything moment in the forest stops feeling guaranteed. Do we know for sure that Voldemort is mortal afterward? Are there stray pieces left in Nagini, in the locket, in Harry himself? When the entire finale hangs on one act of sacrifice, any ambiguity about whether it logically works is a huge problem. In the middle tier, we've got Polyjuice Potion and House Elf Magic. Polyjuice breaks Ministry and Hogwarts security every time it appears. If a hair and an hour of brewing can bypass almost any safeguard, then the Seven Potters plan, the Death Eater trials, even day-to-day aura work all seem strangely naive. House Elf magic is similar. Dobby apparates into Malfoy Manor, into Hogwarts, into supposedly protected spaces. If the Order had coordinated with even a handful of elves, the logistics of the war look very different. These don't necessarily change the ending, but they make the entire system of wizard power feel flimsy. Slightly lower, I'd put the Elder Wand rules. Wand allegiance in Deathly Hallows is wildly important, but the damage is mostly concentrated in that final duel. If the magic worked differently, maybe Harry loses, maybe he wins in another way, but the rest of the series doesn't have to be rewritten. I'll let you guys be the judge though if you haven't checked them out already. Then be sure to re-watch those time turner scenes and the Horcrux exposition and try your own ranking. Which plot hole does the most damage to the story, emotionally and logically? Drop your list and your explanation in the comments so this becomes its own little poll. Because whether you put time turners or Horcrux math at number 1, there's one more question we haven't really faced yet. Why do these plot holes exist in the first place? And what does that tell us about how Rowling is using magic as a narrative tool rather than a strict system? And that's where we're headed next. So if these plot holes keep popping up, that can't just be random sloppiness, right? There's a pattern here, and it tells us something about how the story is built. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. We're not saying Rowling sat there cackling and breaking her own magic system on purpose. We're saying that over 7 books, the demands of pacing, mystery, and emotional payoff kept winning whenever they collided with strict internal logic. Time turners are the clearest example. In Prisoner of Azkaban, they're brilliant. They turn what looks like a tragic ending into this incredibly satisfying closed time loop. Buckbeak lives, Sirius escapes, we feel clever for spotting the clues. But the second you introduce a device that lets you redo hours of the past, you've quietly declared war on every future tragedy in the series. Why not save Cedric? Why not stop Voldemort's return? Why doesn't the Order of the Phoenix break the timeline to end the war in a single night? The story can't answer those questions without collapsing, so instead, the time turners just vanish. Convenient accident at the Ministry, and we move on. Let's dive into it from another angle, the Elder Wand. As a dramatic twist, it's fantastic. Suddenly, wand allegiance is the most important piece of magic in the entire book. The final duel hinges not on who's stronger, but on a technicality of ownership stretching back to Draco disarming Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower. That rule emphasis retroactively ties together Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows in a really satisfying way. But if we hold it up against broader wand law, it creaks. Everywhere else, wands care about emotional connection, compatibility, intent. Here, a random disarm in a different house makes Harry the true master of a wand he's never touched. I'd also argue that the rule is being bent to heighten drama in this one moment, even if it strains the overall explanation of how wands work. And it's not just those two. Polyjuice Potion is a walking security nightmare. It gives us iconic scenes like the Seven Potters and the Ministry heist, but once that level of identity theft exists, the Ministry and Hogwarts security start to look hilariously naive. House Elf magic lets Dobby and Creature ignore anti-apparition wards and unplottable protections, which is perfect for rescues and secret deliveries. Yet it quietly implies that wizards are, in some ways, obsolete. Horcruxes? Their vagueness is what lets the story land huge thematic beats about sacrifice and soul damage without getting bogged down in soul math that might contradict Harry's final death. I'll let you guys be the judge of whether those trade-offs are worth it. But in a sprawling 7-book epic that kept growing in scope, it's almost inevitable that early cool ideas wouldn't fully anticipate later consequences. And that tension between cool moment and strict logic is exactly what we need to dig into next, when we ask whether these holes actually break the story or weirdly make it stronger. And this is where something really interesting happens. Once we stop treating every inconsistency as a fatal error, we can start seeing them as open doors. Because the Harry Potter fandom has basically looked at each broken rule and gone, okay, but what if the story actually followed through on this? Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive into wizarding logic that somehow turned into a fanfiction generator. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. We're not just talking about nitpicking the book and walking away. We're talking about people taking a plot hole or a seemingly convenient moment and building an entire alternate universe around it. Time turners are probably the most famous example. Canon just shrugs and says all the time turners were destroyed. Fan writers look at that and say, right, but what if the Ministry used them properly? So we get a use where Dumbledore secretly hoards a time turner arsenal, or the Order runs coordinated time loops to save James and Lily, or Harry himself becomes a time travel strategist who prevents Voldemort's return long before Goblet of Fire. The exact same gap that frustrates us in Prisoner of Azkaban becomes the spine of an entirely new story. The same thing happens with house elf magic. Dobby apparates into places that should be impossible to breach, snaps his fingers, and casually ignores half the security in the series. In canon, that's a massive world-building headache. In fanfiction, it's a war-winning tactic. There are fics where Harry actually learns from this, studies house elf magic, and builds a resistance that uses elves for stealth rescue missions, anti-Death Eater sabotage, even battlefield extractions. I'd also argue that once you notice how powerful they are, it's almost hard not to imagine a version of the war where wizards are basically support staff for the elves. Horcrux logic and the Elder Wand get the same treatment. If the soul math in the book feels fuzzy, fan writers respond by systematizing it. They map out exactly how many fragments exist, what happens when one is destroyed, and what Harry's death actually does. Or they restage the final duel so the Elder Wand's allegiance follows a stricter, more consistent explanation of wand lore, sometimes ending with Harry losing, and then winning in a different way. I'll let you guys be the judge of whether those versions feel more satisfying, but they absolutely show how much creative energy those gaps unlock. And it's not just fic. On forums, Reddit and YouTube, people have spent years building elaborate models of magic to reconcile all this. Detailed charts about Gamp's lore, flow diagrams for Polyjuice identity checks at the Ministry, timelines that track every known use of apparition, Fidelius, and house elf travel so Hogwarts security actually makes sense. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to fall down one of those theory rabbit holes sometime. It's wild how internally consistent some of these fan systems are. All of that to me is a testament to how rich this series actually is. You don't spend that much time patching holes in a world you don't care about. So, before we dive into whether certain holes really break Deathly Hallows, I want to throw this over to you. Drop your favorite fan theories or fics in the comments, specifically ones that fix or reimagine Time Turners, the Elder Wand, Polyjuice, House Elf Magic, or Horcruxes. Together, we can build a little resource list, and then come back and ask, when we strip away all that brilliant fan work, what are we actually left with on the page? So now that we've laid all of that out on the table, Time Turners, Elder Wand, Polyjuice Security, House Elf Magic, and Horcrux Soul Math, this is where you come back in. Earlier we asked you to be judge and jury for individual moments. Now we've finished the evidence round. The entire case file is open. Let's dive into it. I want to be clear about what I mean by that invitation. We're not just asking, do you like this plot hole or not? We're asking you to weigh them against each other the way the Wisengamote would. Which of these 5 feels actually unforgivable, in terms of basic story logic. Is it the time-turners quietly vanishing after Prisoner of Azkaban, even though breaking the timeline could have saved James, Lily, or Cedric? Or is it the Elder Wand duel, where, if Dumbledore's wand lore is right, Harry arguably should have lost in the most important moment of the entire book? Then, on the other side, which one is easiest to patch with a headcanon you're genuinely happy to live with? Maybe you've got a tight explanation for why the Ministry doesn't just use Polyjuice and Veritaserum to root out every Death Eater. Maybe you think House Elf magic has hard limits we never see on the page, so Dobby couldn't simply teleport Voldemort into the sun and call it a day. I'll let you guys be the judge of which fixes feel elegant and which start to sound like the author's lawyer. Here's the important part. Don't just drop a one-line opinion. Build a case. Cite the chapter where McGonagall hands Hermione the Time Turner. Quote Dumbledore's speech about the Elder Wand changing allegiance through defeat. Point to the moment in Deathly Hallows where Kreacher apparates into the supposedly secure Ministry. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to pull your copies of the book off the shelf or the ebook off your device and treat the comments like a Minicanon court transcript. I'd also argue that the most fun comments on videos like this are the ones that go full barrister. Lay out your claim. Bring in your textual evidence, anticipate the counterargument, and then tell us what that does to the story. Does your explanation make the magic system feel richer, or does it expose a deeper, more interesting flaw that actually makes Deathly Hallows more compelling when you reread it? And this isn't just for today. We're going to be combing through for the most thoughtful, creative, or downright wild but well-argued explanations. Some of those we'll respond to directly, and some we may feature in a future follow-up video where we revisit these 5 plot holes with your best defenses and prosecutions in hand. So, if you've ever wanted to co-author a piece of Harry Potter criticism, this is your moment. Because before we wrap up, we're going to do one more thing. We're going to quickly run back through each of the 5 big plot holes and look at what they actually do to the story when you really lean into them, and one of them, in particular, might change the way you read the ending forever. So, rapid fire mode. Let's actually zoom back out and look at what these 5 plot holes do to the story when we put them side by side. Because this is where the wizarding world really starts to wobble. First up, time turners. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the book casually introduces industrial strength time travel that can save Buckbeak and Sirius in one night, and we're told this isn't even unique to Hermione. Then, when Voldemort returns, no one in the Order even tries to use that same magic to save James and Lily, warn the Ministry, or prevent Cedric's death, which makes the entire war feel like something that could have been fixed if the rules were applied consistently instead of conveniently. Next, the Elder Wand. The big twist in Deathly Hallows is that Voldemort loses not because Harry is more powerful, but because of a technicality in wand allegiance that tracks a retroactive chain of disarms across 2 books. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. If a wand can sense defeat at a distance and quietly switch loyalty when its master loses any duel, then this logic should be causing chaos everywhere in wizard society, not just in one dramatic moment that lets Harry win on a rule we've never seen enforce this strictly before. Then we have the Polyjuice paradox. We're told again and again that Polyjuice potion is a relatively common brew that can mimic someone's appearance and even their voice for an hour with a single hair. Yet the Ministry and Hogwarts act as if magical ID is basically optional. If you can bypass visual security, confuse teachers, impersonate auras, and walk straight into the Ministry with a stolen eyebrow. Why are there not layered verification spells, standardized checks, or even basic anti-polyjuice protocols in a world that just fought a war built on infiltration? Fourth, the House Elf Conundrum. Dobby apparates into Malfoy Manor, into Hogwarts, and into the hospital wing as if most wizard wards are polite suggestions, which strongly implies that house elf magic operates on a completely different level. I'd also argue that if you have an entire species capable of teleporting through supposedly unbreachable defenses, the idea that both sides keep treating them as kitchen staff instead of elite operatives quietly undermines the logic of every major war strategy we see on the page. Finally, the Horcrux math. Voldemort talks about splitting his soul into multiple pieces, the story leans into the symbolism of 7, and then Harry is revealed as an extra accidental fragment. But we never get a firm mechanical explanation of how many pieces there actually are. If the numbers are fuzzy and the process is this unstable, then Harry sacrificing himself once may not be the clean final solution the ending assumes, and I'll let you guys be the judge of whether that uncertainty makes the victory richer or just less secure. Hey everyone, welcome to another way of reading these books, because when we stack these questions together, they don't just poke holes in isolated scenes, they start to rewrite the stakes of the entire wizarding world. And if you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to keep watching. Because next we're going to look at what happens when fans and the author try to patch these gaps with in-universe explanations, and whether those fixes actually hold under pressure. So, if we actually follow those questions all the way through, what does the saga start to look like? Let's dive into it. Because once we take the plot holes seriously, we are basically watching an alternate version of Harry Potter running underneath the one we grew up with. In that alternate series, the Order of the Phoenix is not a scrappy resistance. It's a time-traveling, elf-powered intelligence agency. McGonagall quietly signs off a few time-turners from a secure vault. And instead of hoping Snape's cover holds, the Order runs controlled loops to preempt attacks, rescue key targets, maybe even stop Voldemort from ever getting his body back. House elves like Dobby and Creature become the backbone of covert ops, apparating into unplottable locations, bypassing every protective enchantment that the books tell us is unbreakable. Meanwhile, the Ministry in this version of the story is weirdly competent. There's an entire anti-polyjuice department that hair tests everyone entering the building, cross-checks wand signatures, and runs Veritaserum audits on suspicious officials. There's a Horcrux division with curse breakers, goblin consultants, and a standing order to investigate any object that screams when you stab it. It's less bumbling bureaucracy and more magical technocracy, where the main tension is whether the institutions can move fast enough, not whether they can think at all. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. On paper, this fixes a lot of the logic. We don't have to ask why nobody uses time-turners ever again, or why Polyjuice is only for school pranks and one big Seven Potters moment. But we lose something too. If Dobby is essentially wizard special forces, and the Ministry instantly flags every disguised Death Eater, then Harry's individual bravery, Hermione's improvisation, even Molly Weasley taking down Bellatrix, all feel less like desperate personal choices and more like pieces in a well-oiled machine. I'd also argue that part of why these books hit so hard emotionally is because they sit in this strange middle ground. The magic system is detailed enough to invite fan analysis and explanation, but the story still runs on fairy tale logic. Protection by love. A wand that knows its master. A school that is somehow the safest and least safe place at the same time. If we tighten every rule until it's airtight, the wizarding world might become more coherent, but it also becomes less mythic, less dreamlike, and maybe less comforting. So the real version of Harry Potter probably lives somewhere between those extremes. Not pure folklore, not pure hard magic rulebook. On one reread, you can lean into the internal logic, treat every inconsistency as a puzzle to solve. On another, you can let the fairy tale current carry you, and accept that some moments are there because they feel right, not because a ministry flowchart would approve. And if exploring that tension is fun for you, if you enjoyed asking what happens when the rules actually apply, then we are nowhere near done. I'll let you guys be the judge, but there are plenty of other franchises just begging for this kind of treatment, and in the final section, we're going to talk about where we could go next. So in a way, this whole video is our series finale. Not for the channel, hopefully, but for this specific, very nerdy project of asking whether Harry Potter's magic and logic actually hold together when we press on every seam. Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive, but this time it's also a bit of a victory lap. Some of you have been here since we were poking at the Philosopher's Stone protections, asking why a three-headed dog, a plant, and a chessboard were apparently the last line of defense for the most powerful object in the wizarding world. If you've watched from that first book's plot hole breakdown all the way to this franchise-wide autopsy, thank you. Seriously, this is an extremely specific hobby, and you chose to spend hours doing it with us. Looking back, it's kind of wild how the analysis evolved. At the start, we were focused on seemingly small things, why Hogwarts security folds to a couple of Polyjuice potions, or how a 12-year-old can outlogic a room full of professors. Then, we escalated to the Triwizard Tournament contract in Goblet of Fire, trying to untangle how a piece of magical parchment can override common sense, basic safety, and the entire ministry. Now, by the time we hit Deathly Hallows, we're knee-deep in soul math, Elder Wand allegiance, and whether Harry dying once is even a complete explanation. I want to be clear about what I mean by evolved here. We didn't just start nitpicking harder. The books themselves scale up. Time Turners in Prisoner of Azkaban quietly introduced timeline-breaking stakes. House Elf magic in Order of the Phoenix suddenly lets Dobby bypass protections that were set up as nearly absolute. By the end, the story is juggling time turners, Horcruxes, and wand loyalty all at once, and every earlier decision about how magic works comes back to haunt the finale. We've had some genuinely memorable moments along the way. Dissecting why the Ministry doesn't use Veritaserum and Polyjuice to sort out Death Eaters. Arguing over whether the Order should have shattered time itself to stop Voldemort. Picking apart why the Triwizard Cup had to be a portkey, or how a House Elf could probably have ended the war in an afternoon. I'd also argue that following those threads from book to book is what makes this whole journey feel like one long, connected investigation rather than 7 isolated rants. So, where do we go from here? If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to look through the earlier entries in this series, but also start thinking about a kind of Season 2. Do we turn this lens on the films specifically, with all their changes and new plot hole opportunities? Do we tackle Fantastic Beasts, or do we zoom in on single characters and try to map out every decision they make? Or do we jump to a totally different fantasy series and test its rules the same way? I'll let you guys be the judge in the comments. And the best way to make sure those future projects actually happen is what we'll talk about in our final, more practical call to action coming up next. So, if you're still here after all of that wand logic, Horcrux math and Order of the Phoenix transport planning, you are officially our kind of person. You're not just watching a fun wizard story. You're stress testing the magic like it's a real system that has to hold up in court. That kind of deep watch time actually matters. Long sessions plus a simple like tells the algorithm there is an audience for nearly 2-hour literary breakdowns that pick apart every seemingly convenient explanation. If you made it this far and you haven't hit the like button yet, this is the moment. It's the easiest way to tell YouTube, yes, more of this please, less surface level nostalgia, more obsessive plot hole investigation. And while we're talking about signals, subscribing is basically how you get your official badge for the Plot Hole Department of Mysteries. If you want more videos that treat magic systems, prophecies, and time travel like engineering problems instead of vibes, make sure you're subscribed and the bell is on. That way, when we ask whether time turners should have ended the war in a day, or why house elf magic casually ignores every protection in the book, you'll actually see it instead of discovering it 6 months later in your recommendations. I want to be clear about what I mean by join the department. We're not asking you to agree with every take. We're asking you to participate. So in the comments, give us your ranking of the 5 plot holes from this video, from most harmless to this actually changes everything. Which moment breaks the logic of Deathly Hallows the most for you? The Elder Wand Allegiance twist, the 7 Potters transport plan, or something else entirely? Then share your best headcanon fixes. How do you repair Gamp's law so the Horcrux hunt still feels desperate? What's your in-universe explanation for why Dumbledore's portrait doesn't just sit Harry down and run through the entire plan like a very tired guidance counselor? I'd also argue that some of the best parts of this fandom are the fan-built patches on the story's code. So don't hold back. Pattern interrupt for you. Instead of only talking Harry Potter, what franchise do we put under the same microscope next? Do we tackle Fantastic Beasts and try to map out every decision Newt makes? Do we jump over to another fantasy series with its own wild magic rules and see if they actually add up? I'll let you guys be the judge down there. If you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to queue up the rest of the Every Harry Potter plot hole playlist next. We've already gone through Philosopher's Stone all the way to Half-Blood Prince, testing everything from Polyjuice security to why the Ministry's Veritaserum policies make absolutely no sense. Let's dive into it as a full binge if you want the complete book-by-book investigation. So, like the video, subscribe with the bell, drop your rankings and headcanons, and then report to the playlist for your next assignment. This is the Plot Hole Department of Mysteries, signing off for now. The story never closes, we just move on to the next case file. And yet, even with all of that, the case files never really close, do they? Because hanging over everything we've talked about is that first dangerous idea from the very beginning of this video. What if there really was one spell or one device that could have stopped Voldemort's return before it ever began? For a lot of us, that object is still the Time Turner. Prisoner of Azkaban quietly drops a piece of magic that can rewrite entire evenings, and then the rest of the series spends an almost comical amount of energy pretending it never existed. We get a throwaway line about the Ministry's stock being destroyed, but if you can spin time backwards to save Buckbeak, how do you not at least try to spin it backwards to save James and Lily, or Cedric, or even to stop Tom Riddle from making his first Horcrux? I want to be clear about what I mean by that. We're not saying the book is ruined because McGonagall didn't hand Harry a time turner and a checklist of historical corrections. We're saying that once the story shows us magic that big, our brains can't help but keep asking why no one uses it on the truly world-ending problems. And that question never really goes away. So here's our last what if for you. If you could change one rule of magic in the series to make it fully consistent, which would it be? And how would that rewrite Harry's story from the ground up? Would you cap time travel with a hard paradox rule so the plot hole disappears, even if that means Harry never saves Sirius? Would you redefine wand allegiance so the Elder Wand only cares about intentional duels, which might actually mean Harry loses that final convenient victory? Or would you nerf house elf magic so Dobby can't casually bypass every protection at Hogwarts and Malfoy Manor, forcing the characters to solve those moments without an all-purpose teleporting friend? I'd also argue that playing with those alternate timelines isn't a rejection of canon at all. It's very in-universe. The Marauders literally spent years reinventing Animagus magic just so they could keep a friend company. Dumbledore spends decades running quiet experiments with Horcruxes, prophecies, and wand lore. If they'd had our complete view of the timeline, do we really think they wouldn't have sat around the fire and asked, very softly, what if? Once you start noticing these seemingly small world-breaking possibilities, it's almost like a magic trick in itself. You can't unsee the Veritaserum that should end every trial, or the Polyjuice that should make Hogwarts and Ministry security impossible to trust, or the Horcrux soul math that never quite adds up. Every spell, potion, and prophecy starts carrying a second layer. How it works in the story, and how it would work if the logic were pushed to its limit. And in the end, that might be the most important thing to hold on to. Stories don't have to be perfect to be powerful. The cracks are where the light gets in, and in this fandom, they're also where the fan theories, rewrites, and wild headcanons pour through. Canon gives us the map. The plot holes? Those are the places we get to draw in the margins ourselves. So as we're drawing our own little doodles in the margins, let's take a breath and land this broomstick. We've gone from camping rations to wand loyalty to aerial chases with Seven Harris, and if nothing else, I'd also argue that it proves this fandom never runs out of questions. While the end screen is coming up, you'll see some names rolling by. These are the patrons and community members who actually made this episode possible. A bunch of you sent in your favorite Deathly Hallows plot hole, specifically the Gamp's Law food problem and the Portkey logic, and we tried to weave as many of those into the story of this video as we could. If your name's up there, thank you for keeping the magic and the overthinking alive. We also had help on the research side. people dug back into obscure interviews, early book tours, and that one JKR quote about Wandlore that seems to contradict everything else. So if you spot yourself in the credits under Research Gremlins, that's our way of saying you were the Dumbledore's portrait quietly whispering in the background. Now, before we dive into the next big project, here are a couple of out-of-context moments from recording, just so you know there is absolutely no cool, collected Hogwarts Professor energy happening behind the scenes. At one point, I tried to say Gamp's Law of Elemental Transfiguration 3 times in a row and accidentally invented an entirely new spell. There's also a take where I confidently claim that 7 Potters plus 1 Harry equals 7. And then just sit in silence, reconsidering every math class I've ever taken. And yes, somewhere there is a full minute of me trying to explain wand allegiance while my own microphone slowly droops out of the frame like it's lost the will to live. I'll let you guys be the judge of whether that's poetic irony or just deeply, deeply convenient timing. Looking ahead, the next deep dive is already brewing. We're staying in the wizarding world but shifting focus. Think Time Turners, think Prisoner of Azkaban, and think about what it would mean if one forgotten spell actually proved Voldemort should never have come back at all. If Time Turners exist the way the 3rd book shows us, what does that do to the logic of the entire war? And what happens when we put that side by side with house elf magic that ignores every rule Hogwarts supposedly has? Hey everyone, welcome to another round of overthinking. Basically, if you haven't checked them out already, then be sure to look in the description. We've got the full plot hole playlist, related videos on earlier books, and some reading recommendations if you want to go even deeper into the lore and the meta explanations. As always, this is where we fade into the simple visual channel logo, subtle magical shimmer, one last quiet beat. Same ending every time, so your brain knows, okay, that's the essay. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. Drop your own fixes, your own wild theories, and which plot hole you want us to tackle next. Let's dive into it next time.